but they go away realizing that it's way much more than gardening.
Even if you have zero beekeeping
Hey,
experience.
so today we are having a conversation here with Dion and Casparo that will come to Juicy Land in May from the 1st to the 15th of May and offer a permaculture course, a PDC course with also natural beekeeping. This is a profound opportunity to hear from you both how these offerings, you've worked with permaculture many, many years. Dion, you work with natural beekeeping, biodynamic beekeeping for many, many years. And first of all, yeah, thank you for hearing the call to come to Juicy Land, to come to Portugal, to our dear land there that has gone through many, many chapters now of fire and flood. And so we have a land that is calling for us to connect with it in many different ways. And I feel what really deeply resonates with us is the way that you bring your connection to the land and the way you communicate with the land and the way you approach working with the land. So today I want to just ask some questions to both of you. How this approach came to you? How were you drawn to permaculture? What does permaculture mean for you? Just also so maybe we can get a little glimpse of that world for both the ones maybe that have never heard of permaculture or never had been to a permaculture event, but maybe we also have some people here that have discovered permaculture in different ways and maybe just hearing about your approach. And yeah, maybe I just start with that question of how is it that permaculture connects to land?
What is permaculture? Permaculture, the word itself, kind of originated in around about the 1970s. This guy, Bill Mollison, from Tasmania, Australia, he kind of came up with this concept. And the word itself, this people have said, well, it's permanent agriculture, but it's much deeper than that. He actually defined it as, if you look at maybe almost like indigenous knowledge systems, and people's relationship to the earth and how it worked. It was actually it was almost like a permanent system of agriculture, that supported human existence, or that actually created culture in a way. It was almost kind of created around the land. So I really like, I mean, that analogy of, yeah, we're kind of going back to indigenous roots where we actually have strong relations to the land that we're on, but with that we're also actually growing systems that are actually permanent, and moving completely away of this modern food system where it's all annual crops, annual food systems. Every year we just literally stop nature in its tracks, and the whole system has to start again. So that, I think that's where permaculture differs. We're kind of going back to more kind of indigenous ways of understanding succession within nature, how it works, and how we practice that on the land.
Add to that my own personal experience, which is when I bought this specific piece of land in the forest, quite wild, and with a lot of, let's call it, wild forces and wild spirits around, not human spirits, but you're talking about four-leggeds, you're talking about winged ones, you're talking about tree spirits. So I don't want to make it a big hoo-ha about spirits, but they've been living here long before I came here. And what really inspired me about permaculture was the potential for interacting with that rather than imposing my way or a way on it, but to weave it all in. So that, I know it sounds kind of a bit theoretic, but practically how not to put fences up, but how to allow the antelope to still move through the land. That's one example. And rather fence myself in than fence them out, if you know what I mean. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect is, well, how do I want to grow my food? Do I want to use pesticides? Do I want to do any number of things that are pretty much considered the norm in mainstream agriculture? And it just, to me, didn't make sense whatsoever. And permaculture offered me that model of applying myself in a different way, whatever that way is, And for me, permaculture is not like a dogma. It's more about location, climate, sometimes microclimate, the soil condition, etc., etc., and applying what I observe and what I learn from it in that specific location.
So it's more about the kind of a way of listening or a way of
Correct.
communicating with the land and establishing a certain bridge that can reveal then a relationship that is dynamic and supportive both ways. Asking you into the beekeeping tradition, is there some link with kind of biodynamic farming and permaculture and all these different kinds of ways of approaching the land, wanting to use what is there, wanting to kind of optimally be in harmony with the land and be not introducing, pesticides that comes from a chemical, production somewhere to impose and to, but somehow to use what is there and to begin to see what is that land kind of want to shape like, or what does that land kind of ask of us as humans, or what does it need, or maybe how can we interact with it. I just wanted to ask that question around biodynamic farming and permaculture, if you see some links or.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a very evident link and a very evident integration. The one can't go without the other. Because, if I may take bees as an example, if we talk about permaculture, we're also talking about biodiversity.
Mm,
And if we're talking about biodiversity, then we're also talking about pollinating. And we're not just talking about honeybees specifically, we're also talking about wild bees. I have a wonderful book here called Buzz, and I'm going to be speaking about this as part of the course, which touches on about 22,000 different species of bees in the world. And so, it all hangs together very elegantly, if you choose to open yourself to that and to see how you use the word harmony and harmonics, yeah, how you can balance things and how things can be beautifully in harmony, from your soil condition to growing your plants to the pollen that the plants create, the nectar, etc., etc., for the bees, and then the cycle completing itself, which is their gift to us, beautiful honey.
beautiful. Yeah, I'm so curious to ask a bit more further into your beekeeping. So you're in a tradition, or it's called natural beekeeping. How you are keeping bees, or biodynamic beekeeping, and what does that mean?
For me, I'm sorry that I'm jumping to books again. The title of this book is Common Sense Natural Beekeeping. So it's really about using common sense and not imposing myself on a super organism, i.e., a colony of bees who've been, they've been doing it for millennia, long before Homo sapiens kind of like arrived on the scene. They know what they're doing. So it's like I don't have to kind of come and show them how to do things. I just have to kind of become sensitive, open myself, and become attuned. So, whether the approach is biodynamics, which is Rudolf Steiner, really going back all the way, and his views on beekeeping, phenomenal. Some of his work will also touch on features in this, and it's also a beautiful documentary that we'll be watching. This is the book of the
Beautiful.
documentary called Queen of the Sun. So, biodynamic beekeeping, and then sometimes even shamanic, the shamanic approach to beekeeping. Again, not as a dogma, it's like how whoever keeps bees chooses to attune herself or himself to their own colony or their own location of what is relevant there, what kind of food can be planted for the bees to support them. But it's really a wild field. Common sense,
Yeah.
biodynamics. For instance, let me use an example. When I say biodynamics, I choose to work round about the full moon or just after the full moon, and that's part of a biodynamic cycle. Also, certain weather conditions that I choose not to work with bees, and then others. So it's all very much in terms of my own attunement, not saying that that's how everyone should work, but it's just suggestions. The common sense one is certain things, certainly for me, that would be common sense, what to do, what not to do. I like, for instance, if we talk the shamanic approach, I like to actually meditate. Before I work with a colony, I actually meditate and pray to the queen bee of all the queen bees. So call it the deva of the bees. And I ask for permission. And I
Mm.
also explain myself very humbly why I'm there and what I have come to do. So for me, that would be more of a shamanic approach, and so on and so forth. I can cite many examples, but I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, beautiful. I know that also you speak of a very particular way of caring for the hives where the colony comes first, and the care and the well-being of the colony comes before we even consider, okay, we are having bees because we want to produce honey, right? So often human beings, they are putting up hives because they want to have honey, right? And in your approach, there's a certain, both the shamanic layer, the biodynamic, the different ways where you are considering the environment and the well-being of the hive itself before even beginning to consider the honey. So maybe you want to talk a little bit about that.
So, in a nutshell, the approach is bee centric, it's not human centric.
Mm.
And, we all know what the human centric thing is about in mostly a capitalist world nowadays. It's about profit, it's about maximizing output, etc., etc. And bee centric approach is not about that. The bee centric approach is like, well, what's the season been like for them? Here in South Africa, where I live, we've been through quite a massive drought. So even though at this time of year, end of February, March, I would start planning for harvesting. So this year I'm not going to harvest because I want them, the little bit of honey that they've produced in this drought, to actually take into the winter and for that to help them through the winter.
Right.
So, that attunement, which is like, well, what has their reality been like rather than my need for honey?
Yeah.
I can always go to the shop and go and buy a bottle of honey
Yeah.
that's been, whether it's sent from China or wherever it's been sent from. But if I have that desperate need for honey, I can still take care of myself. Where they, going into a winter, coming out of a drought, need every drop of honey. So
Mm.
that's really practically what it's about.
So you could even say that there's a link here with both the permaculture principles and natural beekeeping in the way that there's an overall deep listening. Yeah, maybe I'll come back to you, Casparo. How do you work in different climates? How do you work with, for example, being, now I know you are both in different places, different climates, and then, you're going to come to Portugal. And how do you work with a completely new climate? How do you begin to establish that bridge of communication with the land?
In context of permaculture and how I guess consult and teach in different climates, different climate zones. One of the biggest things I've learned is succession and photosynthesis. And if you understand that, and in every climate that you're in, then your permaculture ethics and principles stay the same. The principles that we actually share in permaculture is very much based on natural patterns, succession being a big part of those natural patterns. So the principle stays the same in every climate. It's the techniques and strategies that you apply to what you're trying to do within every climate that changes. And that's why wherever I teach, I always teach with what I call indigenous teachers, especially when I first enter a new climate zone or a biozone. But we can apply the same principles. And also so that really deep listening, what Dion spoke about, that deep listening to the land, reading the landscape, understanding what's going on. And that we as humans actually we have a big part to play in the ecosystems. How can we actually intervene sensitively to help this ecosystem? At the end of the day, I feel that's pretty much why we're on the planet. We fulfill a very certain purpose. We have incredible minds. We can take anything. We have these incredible hands. We can kind of change and morph any substance into whatever we want. So we're very much part of that of succession, really. That's my approach to anywhere I go, anywhere new I go.
What does a day look like in a permaculture course where these people have come from all over the place? They have many questions. There are many levels of having gardened, or maybe they have been to a permaculture course. How is that communal, social spirit kind of weaving in with the permaculture journey?
Yeah, so no permaculture design course is ever the same. My approach is very much reading and adapting to the needs of the group. What I love about the permaculture course is you've got these 2 weeks together. So it's like not just, what gets taught in the classroom and everything, but it's actually how we kind of the conversations that we have at night, around the fire, or, how we almost like evolve as a group. Yeah, just have that opportunity to actually live together for 2 weeks and really, really dive deep, on so many levels. A typical day, I mean, there's a lot to cover on the schedules. We got about 45 minute sessions every day, with breaks in between. We generally start in the morning, after breakfast with a nice introduction, a nice warm up, some movement. We go into class. A lot of it's the first few days are quite theory heavy, but then it also becomes more practical. As a facilitator, the first 2 days are really essential and key for me to actually really start reading the group and understanding why people are there, and to see how we can actually tweak the curriculum to make sure that everybody get what they need. But also, people have different learning styles, so you've got to also kind of adapt to that as well. Depending on the climate, we try and get a little siesta in after lunch, and then some evenings after dinner we might do a couple of sessions as well, depending on what comes up. So it's a full busy day, but time really flies. And halfway through the 14 days, day 7, we generally have a day of rest where people can just kind of land and catch up with themselves and have some time on their own. And we also fit in a day where we actually go out and we actually look at other systems. We might go visit other projects, just to, by the time we've kind of landed, the permaculture knowledge, we have to also start applying it. We slowly going from actually all the theory and all the knowledge that we're getting into design. It's not called the Permaculture Design Course for nothing. At the end of the course, people need to be able to design, and we have a land aspect to that, but we also have very much the social people's aspect to that. So we need to bring those two together. And the course ends with final designs, where people actually get to present in groups final designs, and to just really, really get a handle on being able to take these skills away to be able to design by themselves.
What does people bring back usually? I guess it's always different, but what is it that they can take with them and maybe apply to a little garden somewhere or bring to another project?
I can basically share, say, my experience when about 20 odd years ago, also just when I'd bought the land, and I did a permaculture design course with a lady called Avis Hindmarch. And what I took away from that was just confidence. Suddenly I had a real sense of self-confidence to move ahead and do what I wanted to do on the land. I guess if I was just, in a city, in a suburban setup with a garden, it would have been the same. So for me, it was all about self-confidence, because I now gathered all this information and I could work with things. I didn't necessarily follow everything that she suggested. I applied what I felt was right to my environment here, but certainly gave me that sort of bedrock self-assurance, confidence. Okay, and I moved forward with it.
A question around, it, people that is feeling drawn to come to a permaculture course. What have you seen and observed in the past of people that come? Is it people that want to grow a garden and eat, be able to eat veggies from their garden, or is it, I guess there's many different kinds, but what is the maybe a few scenarios of what you've seen before where people are drawn to learn permaculture?
If I had to go back to that experience, they were all ages, certainly all genders, and some people who didn't really, they had a dream of one day owning land, but they wanted to prepare themselves for that. What I found magical is post the course, there was like a real sense of camaraderie and being able to check in. phoning someone is like, hey, I need a bit of advice because I'd met them on the course. There was that resonance with them, and throwing around some ideas. If only for that, it was absolutely worth it for me.
Oh yeah, I mean, so much on the subject. I guess feedback that I get a lot after people completed a course is to answer the first question is people feel like they didn't necessarily learn something new. It's almost like they got reminded of things that they've already knew, This really, and I can see that in the course as well. We're looking at natural systems, we're looking at indigenous knowledge systems. We're exploring all of that, and you can through the days you can almost like see the lights go on for people. Like, okay, there's something drops. And it's like almost like the feedback is I've almost like felt the way what I already knew this stuff. I just like I haven't been able to express it. And I think generally people come to a permaculture course thinking it's just about maybe gardening, but generally they're okay, well, I want to make a little garden somewhere in my, in my urban space or whatever. But they go away realizing that it's way much more than gardening, It's like I guess it's an understanding, I would say, deep understanding of almost like what I call the indigenous soul, or reconnecting with our indigenous souls. Um, and yeah, to maybe emphasis what Dion said about self-confidence, when you're actually walking out into the world after that and you walk into a landscape and you can actually start reading the landscapes, you can actually understand the natural patterns and the patterns. We talk about pattern language, basically. It's all patterns. You start seeing those patterns. The world is a very different place, and I feel that stays with people. And then you also kind of learn, well, call it the permaculture language that you can actually speak to other people with. You speak the same language. Many times, for instance, in my consultancies, it's very hard to explain to people I consult for because they haven't done a permaculture course. You know what I'm talking about. But as soon as they do a permaculture course and we can talk about principles and we are actually speaking the same language. We can actually understand each other much easier. So yeah, that's generally what I feel people come away with most. Lots and lots of inspiration. Um, and feeling a part of something, feeling a part with the environment, feeling that they can actually do something or they know how to actually engage with it, um, or have the confidence, yeah, to engage with whatever they're going to do. Um,
Um,
But we also make it very clear that, it's not just about gardening. You can run your business on permaculture principles. You can yeah, it's so many things. Social permaculture has become a massive thing. A lot of time we actually spend more and more time so actually on what we call zone 0, the community aspects of projects, which is you know, how do we literally live together and get on type stuff. Culture. How do we rebuild culture? Yeah.
Mm.
Wow, beautiful. Yeah, it feels like also there's the element that I sense behind your answer, kind of first of all a recovery maybe of something ancestral, our roots in connection to the land. That there's a recovery of that connection, and then a language to then also be able to share within a bigger network of people that have also before had a permaculture course, that there's almost like a joining of a global community when entering this kind of world. Also, that where there's a language that can build bridges, it builds connection, and that somehow this is, we being in a community in Portugal, knowing if somebody in their description has, okay, we've had permaculture before, we would love to have them in our community, because we're like, well, we trust and know that they will have a very beautiful connection to the land that will be very helpful. And not only that, like what you're saying, that they also have a certain approach to the communal spirit and to people and the way to work and weave with people, like they listen and communicate and work with the land. So it's, yeah, like you're saying, you can even use it in your business, that there's a way to establish a bridge, a connection, a weaving that just opens up into a more harmonic way of living. And I think, yeah, that's why a lot of people are drawn to permaculture. So yeah, I'm very curious to hear also, because you're saying, there's a development within the permaculture community that maybe it's evolving, since the 70s, where you mentioned that it kind of came forth and it was really drawing upon indigenous knowledge, but in this way that it has been now for 50 years, I suppose, plus. How do you see it has developed, evolved? How do you see that now today is different from 10 years ago, permaculture? So somebody that decides to join today, what's the flavor? What's the newest kind of feel, permaculture?
Permaculture design course itself, I think it started off as being very kind of land-based land systems, all about designing the land. But it became very apparent quite soon that, those systems that you set up won't function if there's even if there isn't a healthy social culture actually running them, and that became quite a big emphasis of the course as well. How do we actually manage ourselves as communities? How do we deal with conflict, for instance, when it comes up? All those things are actually, yeah. How do we actually make sure that we share the same vision together when we come together and create these projects? So a lot more emphasis has been put on that. So the PDC itself has developed over the years. It has evolved. It has to. It wasn't designed to be stagnant in the first place. I think that's credit to the founders of permaculture. They were very clear that this thing has to evolve with time as well. So yeah, we spent much more time on looking at social cohesion, how to design social aspects of a project, and then we've also added more stuff, especially as the world has changed. We've got more environmental issues, more climatic issues going on. So we're also looking more at resilience design. That's also becoming more of an emphasis. How do we design for that? How do we design for extremes within climates? A lot of emphasis on hydrology, actually, much more so. How do we actually manage our precious water systems? That's the direction it's moving in. We speak about zones in permaculture, whereas zone zero is supposed to be all about the household and the living space, the shelter space. We've added zone 00, which is actually more about the humans living in the house. As on the other aspect of it, we've got zone 5 right on the other extreme, which is the wilds, nature. And I guess this realization that every zone that we actually visit and every zone that we design has a human and a land aspect to it. And it's only different levels of management. There is this almost like what we call the zone 5 Gaia force, and it sounds like maybe a bit whoopy whoopy, but we do have those nature spirits and nature forces that if we had to stop our project or if it fails, it's just going to return to that. That force is always there, and we've got to learn to live with it.
Yeah, beautiful. And now that I hear that perhaps there's an inquiry within the permaculture of how can just communities, but also society maybe have a way to live more harmoniously with one another and with the land. There is a direct maybe reflection on how we relate with land, how we relate with each other, and how we then build more resilient, more harmonious communities, more and even to society level. So I'm curious to ask you kind of your perspective of seeing this going into the future, how permaculture develops and suggests and dynamically adapts to the change of humans and the change of our times. And how do you see the support of permaculture in the well-being of future community on this planet?
I definitely feel what I've actually seen with the work that I do. I work quite a lot in East Africa and in Southern Africa, in these communities where they're actually not that far removed from basically almost like more of a permaculture culture, an indigenous culture. So it's easy. It's much easier for them to kind of come back to that, because they still have kind of very intact cultural systems. They still have a great connection with land. So I guess I'm kind of inspired to somehow take what I find here in Africa, these tight-knit communities. How do we actually create more of that in, maybe in almost kind of industrial growth societies where in the global north where we've kind of lost more of a connection to that. How can we actually, I could see in the future maybe the days of me, the jet-setting permaculture teacher, coming to an end, and there'd be much more kind of local indigenous permaculture teachers in areas like Juicy Land, for instance, building on what we do there, building the deeper culture, deeper knowledge of the environment, deeper knowledge of the systems, and being able to almost like teach that stuff more locally.
Yeah, because I was wondering kind of if there is a clear direction that is opening towards maybe introducing permaculture principles on more of a massive scale. Is it applicable, or is it more of a local focused, which then of course is connected maybe to a bigger web that then interweaves? Is there a way that it maybe foresees possibility of introducing these principles on societal levels, kind of industrial, like it's turning monoculture agriculture into diverse systems? Of curious of that direction.
And I'm not sure if I'm answering this quite directly, but Drake, where our conversation started, the term that you used that you are experiencing there in Peru, where you are now, what was that term?
Aini, reciprocity.
Tiny.
Yeah.
Reciprocity. So, for me, it starts. So, if I have my fingers in the soil and I'm planting and I'm caring for those plants, I'm looking after the soil, I'm looking after the plants. There is Aini because there's reciprocity. The land gives back, and it's energy that it gives back in the form of food. So if we applied just the energetics of it to being in community, being part of society, which is constantly just giving back, nurturing, being attentive, giving back, then we keep that energetic cycle going. And so for me, that is permaculture at work at the energetic level. Doesn't matter, it can go into corporate level, it can go into anything, as long as the awareness is there.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I work with conventional industrial farmers. I can see the younger generation, they obviously, they into commodities, to run their farm, they got to produce a lot of food. But even they are coming because they kind of see that, they have to start doing things differently. Something is losing out, the land cannot continue giving what they ask it for if they continue, with industrial agriculture. So there's a big shift towards seeking alternatives. And I think even a lot of these, industrial farmers are realizing it's got something to do with permaculture. Even they're not quite sure what it is. They have this instinctual feel that, okay, well, maybe there's something here that I need to explore.
Yeah, I suppose also from seeing the results of extreme monoculture, extreme GMO, seeing all these kind of pesticides that are coming in, how it's, the soil is becoming nutritionally deficient. It's just not working anymore. It cannot circulate in the same manner that it has been kind of forced to grow certain crops, or, when entire beehives sleeping for winter are being woken up and driven across the country to pollinate almond trees, and they're fed corn syrup. Like they're just realizing more diseases, more. I guess it works maybe once or twice, but then on a bigger scale, it's collapsing. No, and then I suppose permaculture brings then a certain alternative solution to some of these breakdowns that we're seeing around the globe. And I suppose there's going to be almost like an urgency to know and recover these principles, just in the manner of recovering what is collapsing.
I mean, the way I actually discovered permaculture was, it's a bit of a story, but I was traveling through Malawi, and in here in Africa, which is a beautiful country. People are very poor though. But I got robbed basically, and lost all my money, lost my passport, and I was literally taken in by a farmer who was practicing permaculture. It's actually the first time I actually heard the word permaculture, and he was looking after me, in exchange for me helping him out during the day whilst I was waiting for my temporary documents to come through so I could return to South Africa. But I could see he was doing things slightly differently. He was like some of his fields he wasn't cultivating, and he was planting, which I didn't really understand, certain crops here and there, and I was asking him about it, and we kind of just sat under a tree in the afternoon sun, and I asked him why is he doing these things differently, and he asked me that why do you farm? I looked at him like, what, to produce food, so I can sell it and make money, and he looked at me and just said, look, well, I farm to produce soil, and if I produce soil, I will always have food. And I will always have money. So for me, that was almost like the light bulb going on. Actually, we have to change our focus from what we think farming is if we're actually going to kind of get through this.
Yeah, I love, the things that I know already from permaculture about the different areas of soil, and then there's the composting, and there's so many different aspects. Maybe you can just share a little bit about what are some of the designs, what are the some of the, where you gather a bunch of branches and you throw around a bunch of compost, and it creates a whole new environment that can open up for soil, or is there worm farming included, or like what are some of the different aspects, like the compost and the ash? Maybe you turn it with ash.
At my place, for me, it starts with producing my own effective microorganisms from plant material that I gather here on my land, and creating a liquid fertilizer, called it EM, and that enriches the soil. That helps nourish the plants because it interacts between the microorganisms in the soil and the root systems of the plants. It's about creating humanure, which is compost toilet. My own feces gets turned into compost for my banana circles, which gives me bananas again. And so on and so forth. Worm farming, so vermicompost, both the worm juice, very good fertilizer, and then the worm compost, which is amazing, the richest, most, it's like brown black gold, and it's so easy. The worms work 24/7, day and night. They don't go on holiday. They don't need they never strike. They just doing their thing, and it's all there. Nature is doing it for us. If we choose to just engage with it a bit differently and using common sense, and hopefully we can, during the course, learn about all these things. So I can, for instance, illustrate how to make your own EM. We can do it. There are 2 weeks, so that can be part of the curriculum. We can talk about vermicompost, composting, creating special niches. Casparo will know about that as well, and he can maybe take it from here.
Yeah, I mentioned succession in the beginning. So basically, when it comes to all the practical stuff that we learn on the PDC, especially when it comes to soil, understanding the trophic pyramid of nature, you have your producers, consumers, and your decomposers. And all I'm doing around as a human being is running around and tweaking the system to make sure that those three players can play the best round. And that's essentially what it comes down to. We've had this debate as permaculture teachers whether, say for instance, making compost on a PDC is still important. And for me, it's almost like kind of one of the most important things. Drake, you mentioned alchemy earlier on. For me, actually building a compost heap with a bunch of permaculture participants on the first or second day of the course and actually watching that alchemy in process, is actually kind of experiencing the driving force of nature, of what we're actually trying to teach. It's almost like that compost heap is almost like the biggest teacher in a way, and actually what it actually does to participants to actually put their hand in the soil, to put their hand in a compost heap, to feel the heat, to feel that alchemy is very important. So yeah, on the PDC and the practical sessions, we do a lot on soil enhancement, a lot of techniques and strategies and time goes into explaining those and actually practically doing it,
It sounds like it also kind of maybe brings an inner transformation or alchemy, potentially kind of nurturing a soil. It's almost like nurturing also something or clearing a field or building. So it's kind of like, yeah, an inner and an outer journey. So I feel very, very honored to be a part of this journey. Also, I want to mention that in Juicy Land in Portugal, where this is going to be in May, it's a unique opportunity because we are a group of people that have just got together around a piece of land and are just building the first roots of a community, of a nourishing connection to the land. It's the very beginning. So there's a unique opportunity to come to this place and have the knowledge and the wisdom of both of you there, supporting that beginning connection with the land and within the communal spirit, and for the people that are joining to come to a land that has recently experienced fire and has recently experienced floods. This is Portugal, and this is maybe bigger seasons or bigger cycles where these kind of fires and floods comes in. But what to or how to even approach when the land begins to become loud and begins to become requiring in different ways, and how do we rebuild from maybe scratch? Sometimes we've had a lot of the land burned. How do we approach a whole new beginning of building from the foundation? So I feel like yeah, it's such a beautiful honor to have you come there, and for the people that get to experience this moment of building from really the foundation of establishing that connection, and practically what does that look like. So I just want to, yeah, mention that, and wonder how you feel about coming there, for example, in that scenario.
I feel a great buzz. It's like a buzz within myself, and the buzz of the bees, and all the potentiality. It's there's nothing quite like starting from scratch. I started here on my land. Luckily, there was no fire, but I pretty much was also ground zero. And I've seen in so many instances how beautiful that natural regeneration is, and just to be part of it is so exciting. It's like I'm feeling so just super excited, and not just to be there, but also to share it with whoever comes to join us. I think it's going to be really special, and I'm feeling very honored that you guys have invited me and us to be there.
Yeah, beautiful. I'm very excited also in the aspect that you're bringing. We were experimenting with a local beekeeper also that you will also come and hear from. And in the beginning, you will come a week before. And I'm curious to ask you specifically about people that are called also towards natural beekeeping or to learning the technical skills, where to start, how to even begin to approach that journey when one is just feeling the calling to get to know the bees, and particularly your approach, if they're coming with that curiosity. Maybe you can speak a little bit about being a steward of the land and supporting the pollinizers, and what are some of the maybe mistakes beekeepers makes, or how, yeah. So if somebody's called, what are the first steps that you will maybe also tease and introduce with when you come in May, and part of the course, what will be maybe some of the things that can support people on taking further steps with beekeeping?
For me, it starts with curiosity. If there's a tug towards, wow, I want to do this, you don't need to be a steward of the land. You can be in a city. A lot of cities now allow you to keep bees at the top of a high rise. One of the documentaries we'll be watching actually shows in cities like London or New York, people are keeping bees like right up there, on tall buildings. Obviously, they have to have permission, but it can be done. And then if you have the curiosity, just by Googling or Chat GPT, it's like common sense, natural beekeeping. What is that about? And how can I apply myself in my own location or my certain circumstance, whatever that might be, and what to avoid? There's so much what I think of as bad practice out there, because of monocropping, because you mentioned it earlier, moving bees across a continent, let's say in America, in the dead of winter to go and pollinate some almond trees, pouring corn syrup in. That's all pretty much bad practice, because it's not considering the well-being of the bees whatsoever. It's just about human greed and profit. It's becoming attuned to, okay, I want to keep bees. Why do I want to keep bees? And if it is for profit, then, no judgment, but then go that route and go and be an agricultural slash mainstream beekeeper. But if it's about the having the interests of the bees at heart, then starting just from that point, which is like, wow, okay, so if I were a colony of bees, or how would I prefer to be looked after? And then what kind of food would I like to have around? Etc., etc. So it's just becoming working that attunement, and then there's so much literature available everywhere. Amazing books. I held up some of it. Amazing books to read, um, that pretty much touches on common sense natural beekeeping. How's that for a title? Where you can
Right, right,
basically learn, if I page through this book, it shows you the different possibilities of creating hives, so different designs,
no, right,
and it actually scores each design by as though it's done by the bees. Why the bees would prefer this design, pros and cons, to
right.
that design, pros and cons. So it really takes you into their world, into their possibilities and the magic of it. I mean, if you look at that, just the magic of that beehive, what's been painted on it. I don't know if it's very visible. It's to create magic and co-create magic, because they're already creating magic big time.
Right.
How do I want to co-create with this super organism? And how can I be not deeply listening, definitely as a starting point, but how can I be in service most of all? How can I be in service to this super organism? They are in service to humanity, period.
Yeah, I heard even a person say once, beekeeper in New Zealand, he was saying
Yeah.
that 60% of our food is dependent on bees being healthy and living, and that actually
Yeah.
bees are dependent on humans for survival.
Yeah,
To-
increasingly, because we're messing up so badly in certain ways. In other ways, we waking up, beautifully. There's such an awakening that's happening, certainly that I've witnessed, and mainstream awakening as well. For instance, certain farmers here in South Africa, even though they are planting a monocrop, they would interplant certain strips of their land with wildflowers just to try and keep the balance a bit. And that's very much in service of honeybees, that they not just this monocrop production thing.
yeah, I suppose there's almost like a revolutionary aspect to keeping bees, like really
Yeah.
caring for those who are actually caring for us in a way. I feel like
Sure.
there is almost like a respect to give back, the Aini that we spoke about. Yeah, acknowledging really that if it's so that they are supporting 60% of food production, well, that's to be honored and given thanks to, maybe just to keep a hive or know at least about that, and in
Right.
that way be able to consider at least treating these bees a little bit differently than just for the sake of producing honey and so that we can have more sugar. you know Potentially
Yeah,
it's not maybe more that we need, but really what we need more of is a diverse land that is supported by the pollination of the bees. And I heard from also an elder once, wherever you move
mm,
into a new environment, if you just have a little bit of the local raw honey, you are
yeah,
introduced to the environment in a way that your body has felt the buzz and the little frequencies of all the devas and the spirits and the bacteria, the life
exactly.
there. So it's almost like coming in and fully adapting. So to acknowledge that, the precious honey is not just to sweeten your tea. No,
Yes,
and it can also be perhaps, but that there's
for
a
sure.
deep shamanic aspect also to coming into an
Absolutely.
environment, and a medicinal, especially in New Zealand. I heard a lot about that. They use it
Yeah.
in hospitals. Manuka, yeah.
Yeah, Manuka. So exactly as you're saying now, the reciprocity, being in service of that, being part of the cycle. But I have friends, for instance, who are vegan. So, as vegans, they wouldn't touch honey. Yet they have two wild swarms where they live in a suburban area in Cape Town. And they
Mhm.
just let them be wild, which is like a beautiful thing. They've just offered them, sanctuary, really. They never harvest or interfere with them at all, but they're there. So
Right.
that's also a possibility. You can be vegan and not even do honey,
Yeah.
but still care for the bees.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. That they actually, it's a gesture of Aini, of reciprocity, of giving back to life. It's a way of giving back in a big way because it supports the whole environment in the area. So I feel
Yeah,
like it's such a beautiful synthesis or synergy that natural beekeeping and permaculture weaves together, and what a blessing for the people that will be there in May to be able to have both in one course. I feel very excited about having you, and also knowing that you have so many ways that you relate with the land in also very shamanic way with the bees, and the way that you communicate with them. I'm curious just to ask on that note, because
yeah.
I know that there's also
Hmm?
some even further initiatory rites and traditions in Europe, in ancient time in Europe, where there
Yeah.
were shamans that had kind of like rites of passage with bees. I know about the book Shamanic Way of the Bee, that
Right.
also speaks a little bit about, maybe it's a little fiction, but maybe it's also actual rights that used to be in Europe.
Hmm.
So I feel like it has a component. When I read that, for example, I felt, wow,
Yeah.
there's maybe a recovery of ancient traditions. I know we
Right.
have different bees in different places, but maybe there is a
Yeah.
tradition that is to be recovered. Yeah, in Europe, maybe, where maybe many ancient traditions has been lost, and we go to indigenous communities all over to kind of have a touch of that bridge to the land and to the spirits. But maybe this is a glimpse into a perhaps almost lost tradition, but yet still there is to be found some
Absolutely.
links.
No, absolutely. So it's really certainly for me about rediscovering the reverence. A colony of bees is like an incredible thing. It's like it is, it's beyond human comprehension. It's like, if we use them as an example of cohabitation, co-creation, selfless service, etc., then us humans are pretty much like lost. We kind of like have a lot to learn from them, and whether we choose to go about it the shamanic way, which is beautiful, and we would certainly like to touch on some aspects. We may not have enough time, etc., but you having mentioned the book, I mean, that's a wonderful way for people who want to come to the course to perhaps already read the book,
Yeah.
and to come with that, being informed by it already, pre joining us, that would be amazing.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I'm very curious myself about that direction of beekeeping, but also like you're
Right.
saying that the bees has so much to teach us about community and about living
Mhm.
in harmony with the land. So it's almost like we're coming there and we're setting up our teachers how do we, mimic and learn how to live better and how to
Right.
buzz in harmony with the land and support the flowers and support the plants to come forth in a bigger, more beautiful expression and communion with humans. So I feel like it's a deep journey that will happen in May, and for the ones who decide to join us there, it will both be such an intimate meeting and connection with land, and as well then that intimate meeting with other humans and building that bridge together. I feel like it offers so much on so many levels, both practically but also human relationally. There's so many elements to coming and joining us in May. So wanting to extend this invitation now, we're open for registrations now. So whoever sees this and you feel a
Mm.
calling, you feel an inspiration towards this, these are the areas that we will cover in depth. And with the two of you, Dion and Casparo, which you have so much knowledge of so many years and so many experiences, it's such an honor to be able to receive from you what you already have learned and the way that you approach the listening with the land. So for
Mm.
me, it feels like coming together with two elders that really has build that bridge to the land, and has been in that communal curiosity inquiry over many years of building the bridge also with the Western longing of recovery, right? And
Right.
then bridging that to indigenous ways and having work with indigenous people also, and so kind of maybe recovering all of our native and heritage, like we're somehow all
Right.
native of this earth, and maybe we can
Right.
return to that orientation that then
Yes.
lives more harmoniously with the land. So maybe you have something to add in the invitation to people.
Yes. So for me, I'm going to keep it short and I'm going to say, how can we who are coming to the course learn from one another? How can we learn from the bees? How can we be of hive mind and of hive heart? So for me, that's how, it encapsulated in that. I am looking forward to meeting whoever comes and to sharing that journey, both with you guys at Juicy Land and then whoever join us on this journey. Really looking forward to it.
Yeah, beautiful. Me too. One little last thing that I
Mhm.
kind of wondered is, when somebody has done a permaculture design course,
Mhm.
what is the global community that then it opens up to be part of? Because it's a certified course, correct? Like it's a course
Correct.
that
Yeah,
opens up possibilities both for working in communities and offering ourselves as in
correct.
service to different land projects, but also what does it open up to in terms of being part of a global network?
Networks in Europe, networks in the States, even as far as Japan and places like that. There's definitely Australia, New Zealand. Bill Mollison was Australian. I speak under correction, either Australian or New Zealander. And he's considered certainly one of the fathers of permaculture. It is quite global. A lot of people, NGOs, NPOs, NPCs, in whatever fields they are working, are very much practically applying some of the principles, if not all of them. But I would very much like Casparo to add a bit more to what I'm saying. If
Yeah,
not,
yeah,
if
yeah.
not today, maybe tomorrow.
If there's anything you feel that could be added.
I think basically just reassuring people that even if you have zero beekeeping experience, certainly from a beekeeping perspective, a natural beekeeping perspective, you don't have to come with experience. You don't have to come with equipment or anything like that. All that's required is curiosity and attentiveness. I may learn something from you. Hopefully, you might learn something from me. But my way of engaging with this is as much about what I can share as what I can learn.
Hmm.
And that's my invitation. It's like, come, let's learn from one another. You may have observed something that I've never observed. And so I'm just open to that cross pollination of ideas.
That's so beautiful. I feel like that's such a magical way of being open for them to group that can learn together, because we come from so many different perspectives and cultures and considerations. And I think, yeah, it's going to be a rich field of people where we can learn from each other and learn from the land and the bees and the principles and have that guide us. And so, yeah, I feel very excited about it. So if you're listening to this and you feel a calling, there will be the information to register below here somewhere. So yeah, if you feel curious, we warmly invite you with any kind of experience that you may have working with land. If you're curious, that's the key component to join this journey. And yeah, so thank you so much, and we'll see you in May. Thank you.
Boom, boom.